My younger brother used a rock to smash the $15,000 Honda Civic I just bought for my daughter. The sound of breaking glass, the metal getting scratched up, the image of my daughter standing there crying her heart out in my parents' yard. It's all still burned into my mind like it happened yesterday. Why did my brother do that? And how did my family react when they witnessed that scene? Let's dive into the story. Before we get into the details, let me send my heartfelt thanks to you. Thank you for taking your valuable time to listen to this story. Hello everyone, I'm Daniel, 45 years old. I'm a senior software engineer at a tech company in Sacramento, California. The story I'm telling today happened during Christmas 2 years ago, and even now, every time I think back on it, I still feel emotions welling up inside me. Maybe it's anger that's cooled down over time, or perhaps it's sadness over a family relationship that's been broken forever. That day was December 24th, Christmas Eve. My family went back to my parents' house in Stockton for the traditional Christmas party like every year. My parents had invited about 20 people, including close and distant relatives and a few close neighbors. Around 3 in the afternoon, my wife and I drove from Sacramento to Stockton. My daughter Anna, who was only 16 at the time, drove the 2018 Honda Civic behind our car. I had just bought her that car 2 months earlier for nearly $15,000 so she'd have transportation for school. The car wasn't fancy or expensive, but it was Anna's first car. She loved it like a treasure. Every weekend, Anna would spend time carefully washing and maintaining the vehicle. She even named it Silver because of the shiny silver paint. Throughout the drive, I'd occasionally look in the rearview mirror to check whether Anna was keeping up. She drove very carefully, always keeping a safe distance behind us. Seeing my daughter confidently behind the wheel like that, I felt so proud. On the way there, my wife Sarah talked about the gifts she had prepared for my parents. The atmosphere in the car was warm and cheerful. I had no idea that in just a few hours, that joy would be crushed so cruelly. Around 5 in the afternoon, we arrived at my parents' house. I parked in front of the yard, and Anna had just parked her Honda Civic right behind me. She got out with a bright smile and ran into the house to greet Grandpa and Grandma. At that moment, Mom was standing at the door, her face lighting up when she saw us. She hugged Anna tightly, her voice full of love as she said to Anna, "Here's my granddaughter. I missed you so much. Are you doing well? How's school going?" Anna smiled brightly and answered Grandma with an excited voice. "I'm doing great. I just finished my semester exams. Got really high grades, Grandma." Dad also stepped out from the living room at that moment. He smiled and nodded to greet me, then gently patted Anna's head. He was a serious man who rarely showed emotions, but with Anna, he always gave the most loving gestures. Going inside the house, I saw that some relatives had already arrived. I saw Aunt Linda, Mom's younger sister, chatting with Uncle Harold. A few neighbors were also there, sitting around the table, helping Mom prepare food. And then I saw my younger brother, Brian. He was standing in the corner of the living room, holding a glass of wine, talking to his wife, Lisa. Next to them was Alex, Brian's son, a 13-year-old kid with bleached blonde hair and a face that always looked arrogant. When he saw me, Brian just nodded briefly and turned back to his conversation. Brian is 2 years younger than I am. He currently owns a small electronics store in Modesto. His business isn't bad, but Brian always brags and compares himself to others. The new Mercedes, worth nearly $70,000, parked outside was the most evident proof of that. Right from the moment I saw Anna's Honda Civic parked next to Brian's Mercedes, I had a bad feeling. Brian's eyes swept over Anna's car with a look of disdain, while Alex stared at it with strange curiosity. The Christmas dinner started around 6 in the evening. Mom had prepared a lavish feast with roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, Caesar salad, garlic bread, and lots of other traditional dishes. The delicious smell of food wafted through the house, mingling with the lively chatter and laughter of the guests. For the first hour or so, everything went really well. I sat next to my wife, chatting with relatives I hadn't seen in a long time. Anna sat at a table with some younger cousins, telling them about school and her extracurricular activities. I noticed Alex, Brian's son, kept looking over at Anna with curious eyes. That 13-year-old kid seemed really interested in the Honda Civic. He even got up and went out to the front porch several times, probably to admire the car from a distance. Around 7 in the evening, I was sitting in the living room talking to Uncle Harold about the real estate market when suddenly, a blood-curdling scream rang out from the yard outside. That scream was Anna's. My heart felt like it stopped beating in that moment. I jumped out of my chair and ran toward the front door. My wife, Sarah, ran right behind me. The other guests also rushed outside to see what was happening. When I ran out to the yard, the scene in front of me made me freeze like someone had slapped me across the face. Anna's Honda Civic had been completely smashed up. The windshield was shattered. The hood was dented with deep gouges. Both headlights were broken entirely, and the shiny silver paint was now covered with long scratches. And Anna, my daughter, was standing there sobbing next to the car. Her whole body was shaking with fear and anger. As soon as she saw me, Anna ran toward me, crying, her voice choking and broken. "Dad, Dad, my car got smashed, Dad." Seeing my daughter crying, I ran over to Anna and hugged her tight. She sobbed on my shoulder, her whole body trembling. I tried to keep my voice calm, even though my blood was boiling, asking my daughter, "Who did this? Tell me." Anna looked up at me, her eyes red from crying. She pointed toward Brian and Alex, who were standing a few meters away. Her voice was both angry and pained. "Uncle Brian and Alex smashed my car, Dad. They smashed my car right in front of me." Hearing Anna's words, I let go of Anna, turned around, and charged straight at Brian with uncontrollable rage. As soon as I got close to Brian, I grabbed his collar tight and pulled him toward me. My face was only inches from his, and I roared with a voice full of hatred. "Why? Why did you do that? Are you crazy, Brian?" Brian was caught off guard by my action. He tried to struggle, but I held tight and wouldn't let go. His eyes showed panic for a moment, but right after that, he regained his composure and pushed my hands away with a face full of fake outrage. He kept yelling, "Let me go! What's wrong with you? Why are you touching me?" Relatives quickly rushed in to break it up. Uncle Harold and a neighbor pulled me away, while Aunt Linda helped Brian stand up straight again. The atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. In the middle of that chaos, my dad stepped out from the crowd. His face was stern, his sharp eyes sweeping over each person. He stood between Brian and me, his voice deep and authoritative. He asked loudly, "What's going on here? Someone explain this to me." Brian immediately spoke up first. He said in a voice full of false victimhood, pointing at Anna, "You should ask that Anna girl over there. She's being selfish with the family. She even insulted and challenged Alex and me." Hearing Brian say that, I was so angry I wanted to rush over and punch him right then and there. But Uncle Harold was still holding my arms tight, not letting me move. I gritted my teeth and shot back at Brian. "You're lying. My daughter would never insult and challenge people." At that moment, Anna was standing next to my wife. She was crying and shaking her head, her voice choked but determined. "That's not what happened, Grandpa. I never insulted or challenged anyone. I just refused to let Alex borrow the car because Alex is only 13, not old enough to drive legally." Hearing Anna say that, Brian laughed mockingly. He turned to look at my dad with a face like he was the victim and continued, "See, Dad, this girl is really spoiled and needs a lesson. She even dares to talk back to adults." Right after Brian finished talking, my mom suddenly yelled, "Enough!" Everyone went silent and turned to look at her. My mom is a small, gentle woman who rarely raises her voice, but when she did speak up, no one dared to argue back. Then Mom turned to look at my dad, her voice calm but firm. "David, go check the camera. See who's telling the truth and who's lying." As soon as he heard Mom mention the camera, Brian's face turned completely red. He turned to look at Mom, his voice stuttering and shaky as he asked, "Camera? What camera? Didn't you say the camera was broken?" My mom looked at Brian, her eyes cold as ice. She nodded slowly and replied in a calm voice, "That's right, it was broken. But I had someone fix it a week ago." Brian stammered, his voice trembling as he asked, Why didn't you tell me?" My mom crossed her arms, raised an eyebrow at Brian, and asked directly, "Why should I tell you? Do you want to control me? Or do you want me to report to you about the color of my poop every time I use the bathroom?" Mom's words made the guests burst out laughing, even though the situation was tense. A few people tried to cover their mouths, but the laughter still escaped. And Brian just stood there like a statue, his face pale white, unable to say a word. After receiving Mom's command, Dad said nothing more. He started opening the camera app and pulled up the video from the security camera. Everyone went silent and focused on the screen. The atmosphere was so tense I could hear my own heart pounding. The video started playing. The image appeared clearly under the front porch light. In the video, Brian was standing looking at Anna's Honda Civic with an unreadable expression. Alex was walking around the car, touching every detail, from the door handles to the rearview mirrors. The kid even opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat, both hands gripping the steering wheel, an excited look on his face. Then Anna walked over, her voice polite but firm. "Alex, get out of the car. I don't like people sitting in my car without permission." Alex didn't bother listening. The kid turned to look at Anna and said in a commanding voice, "Give me the keys. I want to drive around the block." Hearing that unreasonable request, Anna shook her head and replied, "No way, Alex. You're only 13, you don't have a license. By law, you're not allowed to drive." At this point in the video, Brian stepped closer. He looked at Anna with an annoyed expression, his voice somewhat harsh when he said, "Anna, let Alex borrow it. He knows how to drive. He'll drive around this neighborhood. Nothing dangerous." Even though Brian had spoken up to ask, Anna still held her ground. She looked straight into Brian's eyes and replied, "No, Uncle Brian. By law, Alex isn't old enough to drive. I can't lend it to him. I'm sorry, but the answer is still no." When Brian heard that answer, he stepped closer to Anna, his eyes becoming cold and threatening. He spoke like giving an order, his voice dropping low and menacing. "Anna, I'm telling you for the last time, give Alex the keys. If you don't blame me." Facing Brian's threat, Anna stepped back, but still didn't show fear. She lifted her head high and replied, her voice ringing out clearly, "Are you threatening me? I said no means no. Whatever you say, I won't change my mind." Right after that statement, Brian lunged toward Anna with a fierce look, but she was quicker, running to another corner to stand, away from the car. Brian then yelled with a voice full of rage, "You dare to run? Fine." After saying that, he looked around. Then his eyes stopped at a large rock lying by the flower bed. He bent down, picked up the rock, and walked over to the car with a terrifying expression. He raised the rock and smashed it hard into the windshield. The sound of breaking glass rang out piercingly. Alex also jumped in. The kid yelled with crazy excitement, "Smash it, Dad! Show her who's boss!" The kid used another rock to hit the car body, scratching the paint with a look of twisted pleasure. The father and son duo, Brian and Alex, worked together to destroy Anna's car while she stood crying and screaming in the corner of the yard, her voice desperate. "Stop it! Please stop!" Right after that came the image of all of us arriving. After watching that video, the atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. Everyone was shocked by what they had just witnessed. Brian and Alex stood motionless, their faces pale as wax figures. Lisa, Brian's wife, also stood next to her husband, her expression panicked. She didn't dare look anyone in the eye. I turned to look at Anna. My daughter was crying in my wife's arms, her whole body trembling from the painful memories that had just been replayed. After watching the video, my wife Sarah was the first to speak up. She took out her phone, her voice cold as she said, "I'm calling the police right now. This is property destruction, it can't be overlooked." At that moment, my dad raised his hand to signal everyone to stop. He turned to look at Sarah, his voice calm but full of authority. "Sarah, hold off on calling the police. Let me handle this first." Sarah looked at my dad, then looked at me with doubtful eyes. I nodded slightly, signaling for her to agree. Even though I was furious, I still wanted to see how Dad would handle this. Sarah reluctantly nodded and put her phone away. She said with a firm voice, "I agree, but I'm only waiting 30 minutes. If there's no satisfactory result, I'm calling the police immediately." My dad nodded, then turned to look at Brian and slowly said, "Brian, I'm only saying this once. You and Alex apologize to Anna right now. After that, you pay $30,000 in damages." Brian was stunned after hearing that. His eyes widened, and he stammered with a voice full of outrage. $30,000? What are you saying? That car would only cost about $3,000 to fix. Are you trying to rip me off? My dad didn't budge at all. He asked Brian back with a voice cold as ice. What about compensation for emotional damages? Do you think my granddaughter being threatened and watching her car get smashed in front of her face wouldn't affect her psychologically? Do you think repair money is enough? Brian still wouldn't give in. He tried to regain his composure, then said, family should forgive each other. Why calculate every little detail over something so small? After that statement, my dad silently looked at Brian for a long time. His eyes didn't waver at all in front of Brian's excuses. Then he nodded slowly, his voice unusually calm when he replied, fine. No one understood what Dad was planning to do. Brian breathed a sigh of relief, thinking Dad had accepted his excuse. He turned to look at Lisa with a triumphant expression, as he had just won a battle. But he was dead wrong. After saying that, my dad turned and walked into the house. No one knew what he was planning to do. I watched his figure disappear behind the door, a strange feeling rising in my chest. About 2 minutes later, Dad stepped out, and in his hand was a large sledgehammer, the kind that requires both hands to lift. The hammer hung heavy in his grip, but his steps were still steady. All the guests fell silent when they saw the hammer in my dad's hand. No one dared to breathe loudly. A few people automatically stepped back. Dad walked slowly, each step firm on the yard ground. His eyes were sharp as knives, not a trace of emotion on his face. Suddenly, he stopped in the middle of the yard and turned to look at the relatives standing around. Then he said loudly, hold Brian, his wife, and Alex for me. Don't let them run. Right after Dad finished speaking, Uncle Harold and several other men stepped forward to hold Brian, Lisa, and Alex tight. At that moment, Brian truly started to panic. He struggled and yelled, Dad, what are you planning to do? Let me go. Everyone, let me go. But my dad didn't bother answering. He walked straight toward Brian's new Mercedes, the car he had just bought a few months ago for nearly $70,000, and bragged about it to all his relatives. When standing in front of the Mercedes, my dad raised the sledgehammer high. Then he swung it down. The sound of metal clashing rang out piercingly, tearing through the quiet Christmas night air. The Mercedes hood was dented with a deep crater. After Dad's action, Brian screamed like a wounded animal. No, my car. Stop, Dad. Are you crazy? Lisa also shrieked, her voice shrill and ear-piercing. Dad, please stop. That car cost $70,000. What are you doing? And Alex yelled, Grandpa, don't smash the car anymore. But my dad didn't stop. He continued swinging the hammer with incredible strength. He hit the car doors, the headlights, everything within reach. Each hammer blow was like a judgment for Brian's actions. The sound of metal breaking, glass shattering, Brian screaming, all mixing into chaotic music on Christmas night. 10 minutes later, the luxurious Mercedes had turned into an unrecognizable pile of scrap metal. Glass shattered, body dented, headlights destroyed. The $70,000 car was now just a pile of junk. Brian nearly collapsed in the arms of the relatives holding him. He screamed with a desperate and furious voice, Dad, why did you do that? My car. Why did you smash my car? At that moment, my dad stepped closer to Brian, his voice terrifyingly calm, each word like a nail hammered into his heart. Family should forgive each other. You said that yourself. Brian stood there trembling. He screamed with a voice full of hatred. You think you're done after doing that? I'll call the police. You destroyed my property. My car cost 5 times as much as that girl's car. You'll have to pay. My dad didn't seem worried at all. He smiled lightly with a mocking expression, his voice sarcastically replying, Oh, why are you being so selfish? Calculating with your own father? You just said family should forgive each other. Why are you changing your tune so fast? Brian was speechless after that statement. He opened his mouth to say something, but couldn't get any words out. My dad continued speaking in a calm voice. Besides, I didn't destroy your car. Who's going to testify to that? Brian's eyes widened, and he pointed at the guests standing around, his voice almost screaming. Everyone saw it. 20 people here all saw you smash my car. Right after Brian finished talking, My dad turned to look at the relatives with meaningful eyes. He asked in a calm voice, "Did everyone see me smash the car?" Uncle Harold was the first to speak up, shaking his head with a fake innocent expression. "I didn't see anything. I was busy looking somewhere else." Aunt Linda also nodded in agreement, her voice low, "Me too. I only saw Brian smashing his own car. He must be having a breakdown." The other guests also spoke up one by one. Their voices rang out in succession. "I didn't see anything, Mr. David was standing still in one spot. Brian was smashing his own car. He must have a mental illness." Brian went pale at the betrayal of those around him. He turned to look at Lisa, his voice desperate. "Honey, you saw it. You testify for me." Lisa stood there trembling. She looked at her husband, then at her father-in-law, then at the relatives who were looking at her with warning eyes. Finally, she lowered her head and stayed silent. At that moment, my dad stepped closer to Brian, his voice dropping low, each word like an axe blow. "Oh, and my camera just broke too. What a coincidence." Brian stood there like a statue, his face pale as paper. He knew he had lost and lost entirely. After everything had settled down, my dad walked over to Anna. Dad put his hand on Anna's shoulder, his voice full of love when he said, "Anna, I'm sorry. I should have protected you better." Anna looked up at Grandpa. She shook her head and said with a choked voice, "It's not your fault, Grandpa. I thank you for standing up for me." My dad smiled and said to Anna, "I'm going to buy you another car. $20,000, you pick whatever car you like. As for that old car, we'll sell it to a used car lot for whatever we can get. Deal?" Anna's eyes widened in surprise. She looked at Grandpa, then looked at me as if asking for permission. I nodded to my daughter, signaling agreement. Anna hugged Grandpa tightly, her voice breaking with happiness and emotion. "Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you so much." My dad patted his granddaughter's head, his eyes gentle but still tinged with sadness. Standing a few meters away, Brian witnessed that scene. He stammered and asked Dad, "What about my car? You're buying her a car but not compensating me for mine?" My dad turned to look at Brian, his voice curt, without a trace of sympathy, as he replied, "Fix it yourself." Brian was speechless, unable to believe what he had just heard. He stammered, his voice full of indignation. "Dad, you're playing favorites. You're giving your granddaughter $20,000 but telling me to fix my own car?" My dad stepped closer to Brian, standing face to face with him. He asked, "Playing favorites, how?" "Anna is my granddaughter, so giving her money is the right thing to do. As for you, you're just an outsider who happens to share DNA with me." Brian stepped back like someone had punched him in the chest. His face completely changed color. My dad continued speaking in a cold voice. "The moment you lied and refused to apologize and compensate Anna, you stopped being my son. You cut off our father-son relationship with your own hands." The atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. Everyone stood there. No one dared to say a word. Brian stood there trembling, his eyes red with anger and humiliation. He took a deep breath, tried to regain his composure, then gritted his teeth at my dad, his voice full of threats. "Fine. Suppose that's what you want. Fine. I'll sue you for property destruction. My car was worth $70,000, 5 times more than that girl's car. You'll have to compensate for everything plus damages for emotional distress. You think you can bully me?" After Brian's words, my dad looked at Brian and burst out laughing mockingly, his voice sarcastic. "Oh, why are you being so selfish? Calculating with your own father. You just said family should forgive each other. Why do you want to sue me now?" Brian gritted his teeth and yelled, "This is different. You destroyed my property. I have the right to demand compensation." My dad nodded slowly, his voice calm like he was talking about the weather. "Yeah, go ahead and sue. But remember, I also have that video of you and Alex smashing Anna's car. Do you want me to put it on social media?" Brian went pale when he heard this. He stammered, You wouldn't dare." Immediately, my dad cut him off, his voice cold as ice. "Your customers will be pleased to see you threatening a 16-year-old kid and smashing her car just because she wouldn't let your son borrow it. Your customers will be really impressed." Brian stood there like he'd been struck by lightning. His face was pale white, his hands trembling. He knew if that video went viral, his reputation would be destroyed. His electronics store would lose customers, and the career he built all these years would collapse. At that moment, Lisa stepped next to her husband. She pulled Brian's arm and whispered in his ear with a panicked voice, "Let's go, honey. Don't make this bigger. Let's go home." Brian looked at his wife, then at my dad, then at the relatives standing around with cold eyes. He knew he had failed. His voice full of hatred, he said, "Fine. I'll never come back to this house again. Consider that you don't have me as a son. From now on, we cut off our relationship." My dad looked at Brian, his face devoid of emotion. He nodded slowly and replied in a cold voice, "Good. I've been waiting for you to say that for a long time. But remember, don't come back here crying and begging later. This door is closed to you forever." Brian gritted his teeth. He turned to look at me with eyes full of hatred, growling, "Daniel, don't expect me to forgive you either. You and your daughter will pay for what happened today." At that moment, I looked straight into Brian's eyes and replied, "I don't need your forgiveness. And if you dare touch my daughter one more time, I won't just call the police." Brian opened his mouth to say something, but Lisa had already pulled him away. She turned to call Alex with an urgent voice. "Alex, follow me. We're leaving right now." Alex hurried after his parents. The kid didn't dare look at anyone, his head hanging low. Brian's family called a taxi and left into the cold Christmas night. His smashed Mercedes still lay there as a reminder of what had happened. After Brian and his family left, the atmosphere at the party gradually returned to normal. My mom walked over to Anna. She hugged her granddaughter and whispered in her ear with a voice full of love, "My granddaughter is so good. You did the right thing. Don't be sad anymore." Anna nodded and hugged Grandma tight, her voice soft. "Thank you, Grandma." A few seconds later, my dad signaled for everyone to continue the party. He said in a calm voice, "All right, it's over now. Everyone keep eating and drinking. Today is Christmas night. Don't let unpleasant things ruin the party." Although the atmosphere was still a bit tense, people gradually returned to the party. Laughter and conversation began to ring out again, though not as lively as before. At that moment, I walked over to Dad, put my hand on his shoulder, and said with a grateful voice, "Thank you, Dad." My dad looked at me, his eyes gentle but still tinged with sadness. He sighed and said to me, "I failed in raising Brian. He became like that partly because of my mistakes, but I couldn't let him hurt my granddaughter." I nodded, an indescribable emotion rising in my heart. I understood what a difficult decision Dad had to make. Giving up your own child is never easy, no matter how terrible that child might be. 3 days after that Christmas party, my dad drove a dark blue 2022 Honda Civic to my house in Sacramento. That day, Anna was sitting in the living room doing homework when she heard the doorbell. She ran to open the door and froze when she saw Grandpa standing there, holding the car keys. Seeing Anna, my dad smiled and said, "Here's your new car. Promised, didn't I? Go take a look." Anna screamed with joy. She ran to the yard and looked at the new car with bright eyes. She turned back to hug Grandpa tight, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you so much. I'll take really good care of it." My dad patted his granddaughter's head and said, "I know you will. You're a good kid. I'm proud of you." After that, Dad came inside to sit and have tea with Sarah and me. He told us that Brian had sent people to tow away the wrecked Mercedes the day before. Dad sighed and said to me, his voice full of weariness, he didn't say a word to Mom and me, just sent people to get the car and left. Your mom is despondent, but she understands this was the right decision. I nodded and asked Dad, "Do you regret it?" Dad was silent for a long time. Then he slowly shook his head and replied, "No, I don't regret protecting my granddaughter. I only regret not raising Brian better when he was young. If I had been stricter, maybe he wouldn't have become like this." I didn't know what to say, so I just put my hand on Dad's shoulder as a way of comfort. 2 years have passed since that fateful Christmas night. Brian has never returned to my parents' house. He kept his promise, or maybe it was a threat, that he would never set foot here again. Alex, Brian's son, also doesn't visit his grandparents. The kid is now 15, but he's never shown up for any family occasions. In fact, when my mom accidentally ran into Alex at the supermarket a few months ago, She walked over to say hi. But the kid just looked at her with cold eyes and said with a contemptuous voice, "You're not my grandma. Don't claim to be." My mom stood there, as if someone had slapped her across the face. She silently watched Alex turn his back and walk away, her eyes red but not shedding a single tear. When Mom told me about this, her voice was calm, but I could feel the deep pain in her heart. She sighed and said to me, "I don't blame him. He's still young, being raised by his parents like that. What does he know? I feel sorry for him." I didn't know how to comfort Mom. I could only say, "Don't be sad, Mom. You still have Anna and me." Mom nodded and smiled at me, but I knew that smile was hiding a pain that couldn't heal. Looking back on the journey of the past 2 years, I've learned 5 important lessons. Lesson 1. Teach children to say no and protect their boundaries. Never let pressure from family or society force you or your children to do wrong things. Lesson 2. Excessive spoiling creates spoiled children. Teach kids that they can't have everything they want, and being told no is a regular part of life. Lesson 3. Never let the word family become an excuse for others to bully you. A real family isn't a place where people can hurt each other without consequences. Family love must be based on mutual respect. Lesson 4. Actions speak louder than words. Sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to protect the people you love. The final lesson. The consequences of bad actions will follow you for life. Think carefully before you act because you can't turn back time. My family's current life is pretty peaceful. Anna is now 18 and getting ready for college. She still drives the Honda Civic that Grandpa gave her, and every time she mentions the car, she remembers Grandpa with deep gratitude. My parents still live in the house in Stockton. They're still healthy, though sometimes I can see sadness flash in their eyes when someone accidentally mentions Brian. As for Brian, he's still in Modesto running his electronics store. We don't stay in touch anymore, and probably never will again. Even though many people supported us, some still criticized my family. They said Anna was too selfish, and that's what led to the family drama. They told my dad played favorites with Anna. What do you think about that perspective? Leave your thoughts in the comments below this story. Thank you for following this long story. If this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share the story with people around you. See you again in the following stories.